Hey everybody, my name's Johan Philip.
And I'm Matt Carville.
And we are live!
Every Tuesday afternoon for Live Lunch. That is the place that we take the Sunday teaching and we have a discussion about it. We unpack the different themes, ask some different questions, and we're inviting you to get involved in it. Have a listen or submit some questions, that sort of thing.
And we have food.
We do.
So if you want to find out about some good eating options around Brighton and Hove, tune into Live Lunch. So you get fed, well, we get fed physically, but you get fed spiritually. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. live on Instagram, then the video does sit on YouTube and podcast. If you'd like more information about how you can join in with the conversation at Live Lunch, weareemmanuel.com/live lunch. We look forward to seeing you there.
See you then.
And we're live. Welcome everybody. This is Live Lunch. My name is Rachel and today I've got two lovely people with me.
Yes, you do.
Lovely George.
Come on.
Who are you? What do you do at the church?
I'm George and I lead the team at our evening service.
Yeah,
so I'm
do.
on staff here at Emmanuel.
Beautiful
and,
stuff.
Married to Abby, and we're expecting a baby soon. So
Very
lots
soon.
going on.
How soon?
It's about 3.5 weeks.
Whoa.
Well, that's when the baby's due. I hear they're not always on time.
No.
So yeah.
So exciting. And the lovely Christine is back.
Thank you.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence. What do you do at the church? Just for people that may not know.
Yeah, well, I'm part of the pastoral teams here, and I also help to run and write our Thrive study group material.
How is it all going?
It's going well. At the moment, we're writing, I must get this right because I always say the wrong book. I'm writing a study on Galatians.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
That's
There we
really
go.
cool.
Yeah.
And today we're going to just be unpacking what Stephen was preaching this Sunday. And if you missed it, it's on YouTube. We are Emmanuel. But it was basically looking at how we're planting in other cities and what it means to be a giving church. And also a lot about love, I would say.
Yeah.
Very matches his tattoo on his arm now. It really tied it in together. So, Christine, you were going to read some of what he was saying on Sunday.
Yes, this is Matthew 22:37. And Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbour as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and prophets."
Yeah. So that was, Matthew 22. And I feel like love the Lord with all your heart, soul and mind. I don't feel like we're used to that in this culture of love being a command. And here it's a very clearer command. And I just wanted to put the question out there, like, how can you command love? And why is it commanded in this way? Like to love God first and to love others. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it is something that we might react against. I think you want to be free to love who you want. And I think the reality is that a lot of our relationships that sustain over a long period of time, family, friendships, maybe marriages, are not ones that we always necessarily are overwhelmed with feeling for. And actually, a lot of those relationships, love doesn't look like always exactly what you want to feel at that moment, but it looks like commitment, it looks like covenant, it looks like even when you don't feel it, still doing the things of love. And so I think we do need a wider concept of love generally than that we do in the culture at the moment, in the country at the moment. But I think also what Stephen helped us with on Sunday was that this is one specific verse, and then he kind of linked it to some other ones that talk about we love because God first loved us. And so actually, even though it is a command, and we do need to think seriously as Christians, are we doing these things? Like, how do I cultivate that in my life? Actually, it's not so much a law kind of that we're dragging something out of us that we really don't want to do, although sometimes it will feel a bit more like that, as I've talked about. But actually, it's also kind of a heart response to a love that we receive from Jesus. And that's the order in which it goes as well, right? You start with loving God, and you do that because he's loved you. And then from that outwardly flows love for your neighbour. And that's how it connected to our gift day as well, our gift campaign, Time to Plant, looking at all the different church plants that we are connected with and giving financially to them as well. It's that order, isn't it? He loves us. We worship him, and then as we're doing that, really we have to love other people. It really comes out of that.
Yeah, it's important to remember who's doing the commanding here, and it's God, isn't it? And we know that God is good and he wants the best for us. So it's absolutely the best thing for us to love God.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Because everything else flows out of that, really, doesn't it?
Right. So it's almost like we love God first, and then, it gets put in us to then be an outpouring of love, and maybe an outpouring of love would be giving. And I think that's what Stephen demonstrated really well, is how we can love through giving. And I think it can be quite a difficult thing sometimes to part with your hard-earned money, and there's other things that the world offers that you might want to spend your money on, new phone or new clothes and things like that. And so it being quite a sacrificial thing, but then that may be linking with exercising trust to God, because when we can give, and I really liked what Stephen was talking about, how when we're giving, sometimes it doesn't have to be to who we know. And that's like this gift day, is that you're giving money and it might just feel like, I'm just giving £50 and I'm never seeing it again. But then God promising that our giving is going to be fruitful, and we can be loving and giving to people we don't even know, people that we might not ever meet. But that being quite, you feel like you're part of God's plan in a way that we might not be able to do on our own.
Yeah.
Because money can equate to like giving power in a way, like I don't know how to explain it, but giving money and then someone else receiving it that you're never going to see means that God can use us in ways that we maybe wouldn't be able to.
Exactly.
Because money can be used as such like an interesting tool. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but
yeah, that's really helpful. I think it can be a controversial topic. Money.
Yeah, I think so.
And particularly maybe in sort of years gone by, although I'm sure it still is, actually churches, if you were to walk into a church and it's a gift day, of course it is. These guys are always on about money. And you've touched on something there which is really helpful, which is about how it's thinking wider than ourselves and being part of something bigger than ourselves in a way that we engage in doing that. But I guess we can throw it back out to you guys. Like, what would you say to someone who goes, "Oh, you guys, why do churches talk about money? Why do you need money? And why do you need my money? Why can't I just turn up?" What would you say to someone who asked that?
Well, anybody needs money in this world to live, don't they? I know some people have very, very little money, but actually, whether you have a home that you need to maintain, you need to pay rent, it's just the same, isn't it? As churches having to have properties, to pay salaries, that doesn't come from nowhere.
Yeah.
It comes from somewhere. And it comes from people who willingly are choosing to be part of that particular church. And so it's part of their support for that church, but it's also, I think we mustn't forget the fact that the church is God's, and when we give, we actually make a sacrifice to God. That is one of the few ways, actually, when we look in the Old Testament, we see all sorts of weird and wonderful sacrifices. But actually, in our day and age, often it's things like time and money that we sacrifice, because they're the things that are most precious to us.
Yeah, and I think it is a controversial thing because, I don't know, as an outsider looking into a church that has maybe big cameras like we do and a stage like we do, you can sort of make these assumptions like, oh, this church just has loads of money, and a lot of red flags, I think, would come up in that context. But when I've had the privilege of working for a church and having my eyes revealed to those things, it's almost like the cameras that we use at church was a result of somebody giving, what I found out later down the line, which is so interesting to me because I came to church based on watching a live stream with those cameras. Yeah. So it's almost like that person that was giving, God knew that it would save X amount of people or bring people to know his message and things like that. So I guess it's like you say, a sacrifice, but trusting that God will use our giving for his good. Yeah. And you can see it acted out. So I think that's really beautiful. Yeah.
And I think if people have concerns about where their money actually goes to, you can go on the website and see the financial reports and things like that. Yeah. Transparency is really important in any organisation, and the church is no different. And you can always go and speak to the elders about where the money's actually going, that kind of thing. Because when you think about it, there's a vast number of things that any church is involved in. So it might be their work with the poor, there's their kids' work, there's the things that they put on for the elderly. It's not just the meeting on a Sunday, and it is the staff who might be doing a lot of pastoral work that we just don't see. Yeah. It will be people like the comms team and people working in the offices, and they're things that we don't see every day, but they still need to be paid for.
Yeah. And I don't know why it's such a controversial topic, but yeah, we, like you were saying, everybody needs it, and we need it to put on things, we need it to run our buildings, and we had our recent gift day, which we now have lovely new toilets. So I think for me, like, some of the red flags that came up at first have been slowly, like you say, as you look into it, it's revealed what does the church actually use its money for. And if you are skeptical, not just our church but any church, like, look it up, and you can see it for yourself, what's happening.
Totally.
But it's hard, it's really hard to give, like, when I think it's hard for all of us. I think there's things that can block it. Have you guys got any examples of when you've given, seeing the fruit of that giving, or maybe you've seen somebody else give, or maybe someone's given to you, something in that realm?
I think so for me, I think a lot of the fruit of it is what we would talk about quite a lot at church, in terms of the classic verses where Jesus says, where your treasure is, your heart is also. It kind of follows that. And part of leading ourselves and leading what we're passionate about, what we care about, we want to care about the things that God cares about. How do we do that? One of the ways we can do that is through our giving. And I think that has been my story, at least one of the factors in which that has helped me to love the church and to love the things that God does, is through giving. And I remember one particular time I think I was a student. It was a gift day. I can't remember what for, but I had the money saved up for an Xbox. And I was really, really stoked about this. And I thought, this is going to be fantastic. And I didn't really have anything else to give. And I just felt in that moment that God would have me give that. And it felt like quite a sacrifice. I recognise it's not sacrificing food to eat. I recognise it's not as deep as some things. But at the time, as a 19, 20-year-old, that felt like quite a big deal as a student with not very much money. And an Xbox didn't turn up at my door the next day. It wasn't a miraculous provision story. I was fine in terms of living, and so I guess there's provision there. But really, I do remember that sense of being joined up in something bigger, having slightly more of God's eyes for how he sees us and our finances and our role within the world, slightly more of a heart for the church. And it just slowly builds, I think. It's true, where your treasure is, your heart is. And so I think that would be the closest I get to one of those stories.
That's really cool.
Is there anything that you've got, Christine?
I've got lots of stories about giving and receiving, really, over a lifetime. I think that from when I first came to this church, I began to tithe. And subsequently, when we got married, we had a very tough time financially and had young children, and decided we would just keep doing this and we would trust God. And we kept a book and wrote down the prayers we were praying, but we also all the answers to prayers. And it's just absolutely astonishing the amount of money that came to us by other means. But we did decide that even when we had such a small amount coming in, we would just keep giving because we felt it's the right thing to do. And actually, I think it really helps you to engage in the adventure of faith, that if you give to God, you are putting your trust in him, and you're saying, I'm going to trust you. And he's always faithful. We've always found him to be faithful.
Yeah, that's so great to hear that you've kept a log, like because I've started to do that, like write things down, and I can look back, and it's so amazing that we can lean on a community here. And I think, again, when you're an outsider looking in, you might be like, why is everyone so like happy clappy and like togetherness? But when you're actually living in it, and I can lean on people to support me and not try and carry the world on my shoulders, it's just such a relief. And it almost, just knowing that I can have somebody that would help me, and seeing, like, the first time someone ever gave to me, I was so shocked. I was like, what? Like, I just didn't understand it, because in my context it just didn't happen. Like, you got given money from your family sometimes, but never just people that barely even knew you. And that's what I've seen on this in this church, is just people's giving hearts. And God can be quite funny with it, I don't know with you, but with me, he is quite funny sometimes. Like, I'll need a specific amount of money and it will be the exact amount that he'll give me. Or one time it was this £10 note that just kept following me. Every time I got it, I gave it, and then it kept coming back, and it just became this really funny thing, to the point where it had been given and got about 4 times. And then someone I work with here gave me a gift when I was not feeling well at home, and inside it had this £10 note. And I went to her and I was like, no way you've given me this £10 note. And we started laughing, and she was like, God just told me to give you this £10 note. And it's just like, it's really funny what God can do with it. And it's just, like you said, it makes you feel like sometimes we can hang on to these things, like you probably did with the Xbox, or that I'm doing to this £10 note, because when you don't have any money, that can buy you a lot of stuff and things that you need. But then giving it away, but then watching and see what God does with it, it's so astonishing. And like, he will keep his promises that he says in the Bible. Like, he will supply all your needs, he will give you everything you need. And I think in this day and age, people stress a lot about money all the time. So I think that's why giving can be quite a sensitive topic, because
it's very anxiety inducing, isn't it, when you've got lots of bills and coming in. But I'd say you can trust God. I think another thing I'd like to say in this conversation is that we talk about what's mine and what I want to keep, but actually none of it's ours. Yeah. Because everything we have is given to us by God. And that changes your perspective, actually. If you can think like that and think, well, everything I have, God has given me anyway, then it's not mine that I'm giving to him, actually, in one sense. It's what he's already given me anyway. And God is so lavish in his blessing of us. And it may not be financially, it may not be gifts through the door, but we do experience the blessing of God on our lives.
And I think, as Stephen was talking about that, just enjoying God's love. Yeah. And that kind of comes under what you were just saying about enjoying everything he's given us, but also that being the love that we can actually experience firsthand. I mean, that's what kind of made me realize that God was real in the first place, was when I first experienced the feeling of love, and then you've got the giving that's kind of an action of that love. And I like what you said about everything has been given to us anyway, because that's quite a free way to live. Then you're not holding on to things, and you're not feeling bound to things. So actually it can be anxiety inducing to be like, I don't want to give all my money away, but actually it's the opposite of anxiety inducing. There's actually freedom in it.
I think it's really good to have like disciplines, like we have spiritual disciplines like prayer and Bible study and things that we do regularly. I think it's good to be like that about our giving as well, and to set up things that help us. So I remember reading a book a long time ago, and it talked about that when you get your salary, you think of it in these terms, that you give first, you save next, and you spend last. So we always set aside that money that was the giving money, and it was like we never saw it. So it wasn't, again, it helped us not hold on to that, because we knew that money was for God. And there's various ways you can do that. You can put it in your Monzo pot, other banks are available, or you can, if you set up a standing order, that helps you to have a habit of giving. Although I think the thing with the standing orders is really good in that it's great for the habit, but it's not so good for us in remembering, I'm actually giving to you, Lord, and I'm sacrificing. So we need to remind ourselves of that as well.
You can't disengage from it, can't you?
You can disengage from it. It just happens, and you forget to review it or all that sort of thing. But I think I think it's just great to think about it and not be haphazard.
Totally. Yeah. I think the only thing that I'd want to add on this is sometimes when I'm hosting meetings and I'm hosting the giving moment, which we talk about every week in some context, is one of the questions I put to us at the beginning is like, someone might say, why does God need my money?
Yeah.
And I often say that he doesn't actually. He doesn't need it. And there's practical things we talked about earlier. We do, as a church, run on finances. We do need that. But in another sense, God owns everything. He does not need it. But he catches us up in his plan for the world. And we are co-workers with him. In a kind of a fairly hilarious co-worker, because there's one person who does everything and we just sort of get joined up in it, but we do, and he uses us, and it's the same in all areas of our lives. He could save without us, he could save in a moment, but he uses his church to do that. And so to get caught up in that in a very practical thing, and finances can feel like, it's kind of an administrative thing. It's not. It's part of this being joined up in God's kingdom and being his co-laborer. I remember listening to, there's a podcast, Mere Fidelity, that one. They asked the question, imagine a billionaire came to your church and said, well, I will cover every expense. You don't need to do anything. Like, would that be a good thing for your church? Would it be a healthy thing? And in one sense, please do give lots if you want to give lots. I'm not saying don't. But in another sense, we want people's hearts to be free from the love of money and to be free to join up in God's in God's plan for them. And we also want to be joining with him in this. And so actually, if the church isn't owning themselves financially, and if the church isn't owning God's kingdom and wanting to be joined with that, probably wouldn't be that healthy of a thing. Also would be, you'd want to give it out in other ways. Obviously, practically, you'd think it through. But it's interesting to think through. God could answer every need of this church like that. Tomorrow, our bank balances could be full, but he doesn't. Because he wants to use us, because he loves to use us, because we're not just add-ons to this kingdom. We're soldiers within it to be used.
And I think we like to be used, like in a way that we like to work and serve others. Like it's embedded within us to.
Good for us. Yeah.
Like I think a lot of millionaires or something might feel quite low a lot of the time when they're living in their houses and they've got like a spa and a basketball court and they've got everything they could ever want possibly in their house around them, so much money in the bank account, and yet have this deep level of emptiness. And I think a lot of people nowadays will joke about it and be like, money can buy happiness and all of this kind of stuff, but is it really, like you were just saying, George, we like to work, we like to be using our giftings to help each other and lean on each other, and it's part of having freedom as well. So I think it's quite important as a church to
be part of this, to do it.
Work together.
I think also we need to lift our gaze, don't we, and think about how glorious the church is and how glorious God's plan for mankind is. So we're not just like paying subs to a club. We are actually part of something amazing and wonderful that is God's purpose for the earth. And I'd really recommend, if people weren't at the Weekender, to listen to Neville's talk about the church, because especially when we're giving to church planting, it's just so good to think about a great, vibrant, truth-filled, spirit-filled church is what people need, and that's the way that God reaches people.
It's so nice. And for people that might not know what a church plant is and what they're giving into, what would you say? Because as an outsider, again, before as a Christian, the idea of somebody going around and planting loads of churches, again, it pops up a lot of red flags. Is it something that people are going to do to try and change everyone's beliefs and things like that? But actually, we feel like as a church, God has put it on our hearts to go and plant churches in these places. What does that say about God? What is it that he wants to do? Bring his children to know him? Is it to, because I feel like that's something that people might not know.
It's an interesting question. I think even the phrase church plant is weird. It's an in-house thing.
Yes.
And I do remember a church I went to growing up, someone talking to someone about a church plant and them thinking they were talking about gardening, and you just wouldn't you? Why is it called that? Why isn't it just called a church a new church or a church start, I don't know, something like that. And so even that's an odd phrase, and I don't quite know why we call it that. But it's helpful to kind of evoke images of kind of the church as a living thing, and it's a plant, and it's an organism as we're all joined in together, and we sort of sow a seed of sending some church, whatever. I can understand, but it is a bit weird. And so I would always try to explain to people, when I say that, I mean we're starting new churches in different places. That's basically what we mean. And then why do we do it? Well, the Christian is, we are commissioned to do that, to go into all the earth and to make disciples and baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Jesus says that at the end of the book of Matthew, and I think was mentioned on Sunday as well. And so even when there might be an offence there of how dare you think you can go into other places and tell them what to believe, and we wouldn't tell them what to believe. I guess as Christians we know that's actually really what we're called to do and what we're called to be. And actually, when you're going to share the best news that there is, when you're going to share the thing that is the most precious for you, it's this order of once you have been loved by God, you love Him, and you just want to tell people, because it's just too wonderful to keep to yourself. My old youth leader growing up used to say, imagine if you discovered the cure for cancer, and you just didn't tell anyone. You made sure you didn't have it, but you just kept it in your back pocket.
It's like gatekeeping.
Yeah, right. And there are some, I mean, I won't get too political, but there are some very controversial figures who have these, have medicines that are really important that they put massive bills on because they want to be rich. And it's that kind of, it would be that kind of thing. It would feel like that as a Christian. I have discovered, or God's discovered me, but shown me something so wonderful. Just life with Him, life forever, life doing church together. Is the best thing about my life. 100% is the best thing about my life. And so to not share it is as unnatural as not sharing the cure for cancer. It feels that wrong to me. Now, definitely Christians have done this wrong in the past, and we don't want to own every time a Christian's gone abroad to try and share the word of God. And there's all kinds of different ways that's gone wrong. And so Christians do get this wrong. But ultimately, if it is the best news ever, we still want to share it. And we want to do it in wonderful, kind ways, respecting other beliefs, but also bringing through what we think is the truth, and affirming in different cultures what's wonderful in them, but also challenging what the gospel challenges as well. So there's loads to say on that, but I think hopefully that touches on some of those.
No, that's
points.
really, really useful, and it's just encouraging to hear. And I think touching on what Stephen was saying on Sunday as well, about like there's nothing that we can do to earn God's love. However, when we love God first, like you were saying in the beginning of the scriptures, like He puts it in us to then go and share that love. And I think what you were saying about it being so good not to share, I always use the cake analogy. Like you've got a cake, it's really good, and it's so good that you don't want to share it, you want it all to yourself. However, you get this other cake and it's literally out of this world, and you're like, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. And you have to share it. It's like,
it would be, go on,
you're like,
it.
please, you have to try it.
Please have a bite. Yeah.
That is what it's like when you have God living inside of you. You just want everybody.
Totally.
And it's like, taste and see that the Lord is good yourself. Like, love God and you will see like Him act and move, and then all those things that are really hard sometimes, like giving, I feel like will just start to flow.
Yeah, and I think, that we've been talking about people outside might think this and that. We're not asking people who are just visiting us to get involved with giving like this.
Yeah.
This giving is for those that love Jesus and that they are part of our church. So we're not asking visitors to come and be part of our church plants from day one. But it's really for church members and people who've said, yes, this is what I want to be part of.
Yeah, totally. It's really great.
So you can still give. Go to WeAreEmmanuel.com/time to plant. So please do that. If something in this conversation has stirred you, or you've just not been able to yet, not made it to church this month, we'll be giving another giving opportunity on Sunday as well to do that. But definitely encourage people to do that.
And if you can't give, like give time and pray, because that is so valuable.
Absolutely,
and that is just our prayer has power. So pray for the gift day if you don't have any to give. But that's a wrap on Live Lunch. Thank you so much if you've tuned in. Thank you for being my lovely guests this week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.